Oh, look at this drip. Look at this drip! Hello, humans, and welcome to another episode of Gen X Gamer. Look at that. They try to do their best, but, you know, there's only so much surgery can do for your face when you're ugly. Well, guys, today we're going to talk about the Dreamcast, baby. 26 years. 26! What you know about that? Guys, when this console came out, let me tell you, we had a hard choice to make in our household. It was PS2 or the Dreamcast. Those were the only choices. And the reason we got the PS2 is because it played movies. That was decision, right, to be made. You could have movies and video games at the same time, one machine. That was a huge selling point, believe it or not, for a lot of households, especially, you know, in households like mine where, you know, I had 4 little kids that I was raising, and so every dollar was at a premium back then, especially when you didn't have an education, right? I was doing it, working 3 jobs, trying to do the best that I could. So I had to make a choice back then, but I always, you know, wondered about that machine. I only got to play it with friends, and I didn't actually become an owner of a Dreamcast until, I want to say 2015, 2014, around there. I got this particular one in Malaysia, which is one of the biggest scores that I've ever made. I bought this machine with a bunch of games that you see back there, and the guy also had a folder of a bunch of burned games that he also gave me, and it was 125 bucks. Let me tell you, it made that trip to Malaysia all the better. I remember, you know, a lot of my friends back then were playing the PS4. They were playing a lot of Black Ops. They were playing, Black Ops. They were playing Call of Duty, and I was playing this. You know, and you can go back and see some of those videos. I think they're still on the channel. A lot of stuff I made members only because, you know, some of the stuff YouTube didn't like. They changed their policies, don't tell you anything, and of course I'm just yapping, you know, saying whatever. So, you know, I had to put those back there so they're not so visible. So regardless, guys, to me, this machine always represented, again, innovation, you know, and everybody criticized the controller, and I thought it was rather cool back then. Of course, with the VMUs, you know, I got this one off of eBay when I bought the first console. You can still get them, you know, and it really speaks to how good this console was and how early it ended, unfortunately, because, you know, Sega ran out of money. That's really what happened. But the legacy that it has, the games, man, the games, that the technology, right, that it brought with it at the time was innovative. You know, and it was a great goodbye song for Sega. Now, I'm not going to sit here and go through a bunch of the, you know, lore of the console or a bunch of the technical specs and all that, because it really doesn't matter to me, you know, especially when it comes to consoles, whether it was better or worse than the PS2. I think what this machine had to its name was soul. You know, soul in a lot of ways. It has, you know, one of my favorite games that David Bowie was part of, an artist that I admire. It had, you know, great football games, a lot of sports games, the 2K series, I remember. You know, of course, you know, the launch games, but it also had a lot of arcade greats, you know, that just felt better on the system, you know, and even as I played it years later, there's a lot of games that I prefer playing on the Dreamcast over the PlayStation 2, and I don't know if that's, you know, the same way for you guys, specifically arcade hits. For some reason, they just feel better to me on the Dreamcast than they do on the PlayStation 2. The PlayStation 2, I played a lot of RPGs and stuff like that, and this machine had its share of RPGs and other hits. But, you know, all this time later, right, you know, it makes me nostalgic, not because of any monetary reason, you know, not because of the mismanagement in Sega and what happened. It's not because of that. It's because when we lost Sega as a manufacturer, we lost another pioneer when it came to innovation. If you remember the console wars, guys, and what made it different than today's console wars is that you had very different platforms. You know, the PlayStation 2 was not the same as the Dreamcast. It was not the same as anything else. And Sega always tried to do something different, try to do something better, you know, wanted to change the game up. They would always come up with innovations with their games where sometimes they couldn't compete with the Nintendo, you know, because they were always at number 2, you know, back in the console wars. So they had to add stuff, sauce it up, more salesmanship, this and that and the other. At least on the American side of the company, it always stayed that way. And you can tell on its titles, you can tell during its marketing. But man, do I miss those days. You know, the more I learn about the way they're doing business now, you know, and for me, as a person who does business analysis, I don't even like to talk about it. I don't like to talk about work and my hobby. I clearly understand why companies are going this way, and it would be my professional duty as I'm looking at their operations to guide them certain ways, you know, in the ways of making money. Because even though I don't like it, even though you don't like it, the fact is that the younger generation is different than us. You know, we had console wars. We identified with a platform. We identified you're either a Genesis owner or a Super Nintendo owner. I mean, you had to pick one. You couldn't do both, right? I mean, you had to rep something. And now, you know, at least the younger generation, you know, when I talk to my grandkids, for example, they don't identify with the platform. They identify with the game. Like I have, you know, 2 of my grandkids are Roblox players. They play Roblox, nothing else, right? They just play that one game. My grandson, you know, he made me proud. He made me proud because he told me he wanted a PlayStation for Christmas. So he's been one who's also played Minecraft. He's played Roblox, but he's more of a gamer, right? He's more like, you know, a little bit of influence from Grandpa, I think, because, you know, I've shown him the Xbox, I've shown him the Game Pass, he comes into this game room and looks at all this stuff, right, and asks me about things. But he has a little bit more love for the console gaming, if you will, as opposed to my other grandkids. And, you know, I just wish, you know, that some of that DNA was still around. I think that when we lost Sega as a company in this space, we really lost, you know, a soul, a part of the soul of the video game business. You know, what made it different than other businesses. We knew back then that video games was a different type of business. It wasn't, you know, it wasn't movies. It wasn't just about making money. It was about art. And that's no longer the case, at least not for the big 3. Right? For them, it's about making money. For them, it's about being number 1. For them, it's about chasing the almighty dollar. And you can tell in the products they make. I wish they would find a way to marry those two things, because I believe that you can make good quality products that people would like with innovation, as it has been done before. You know, the Wii would be a perfect example. And be successful in the market, give people something different. But in this day where younger generation is just turning to screens and don't have a love for physical media like we do, that's highly unlikely to happen. Let me just say that. But for those of us who had fond memories of these kings, of these giants, man, what a great time. What a great time to be alive. What a great time to be a gamer. What a great time to be a Sega fan. All right, humans. I will catch you on the next one. Make sure you like and subscribe. Help the channel out. Take care.
New videos every Monday and Sunday. Thank you for joining me on another episode of the Gen X Gamer. Remember to like and subscribe, click that notification bell, and remember, never ever be afraid to be happy. I'll catch you on the next one. Take care.